Thank you everyone for taking the time to join us today. And I really would like to thank Rodrigo for organizing the Sitecore User Group Brazil. Brazil is, I guess, becoming more and more, I guess, relevant to Sitecore as well, as we do have a community that was established in this country around Sitecore, and Rodrigo is a big part of that. Thank you a lot.
And you as well, my friend. You as well.
The topic for tonight is something that I presented during the symposium, so it's very fresh in my mind. And I want to keep it this very informal, and if you folks have any questions at the end, feel free to ask, no problem at all. But it's mainly around the migration of assets into Content Hub. What we should be thinking in terms of the strategy around that, content strategy pretty much, and the technical approach as well. So I'm Eduardo Moraes, I'm Director of Digital Strategy and CX at Nishtech. I'm also leading their Sitecore practice. I have been working with Sitecore for the past 13 years. I live in Ottawa, Canada, but I'm all over the place. I'm sometimes in the United States, sometimes in Brazil, sometimes in Canada. And I do know the folks that are here, like Chris and Rodrigo, so we are pretty close to each other, so that's really good to be here with you guys. I work at Nishtech. Nishtech is based in Cincinnati, and we, as many of you guys are here as well, we do Sitecore implementations as our bread and butter. So for the agenda today, we'll go through what was the original situation, how Sitecore Content Hub helped to solve that, the approaches around the data modeling and all the the thinking that you need to have behind that, preparing to migrate the different sources they had into Content Hub, and then I'll focus on mainly two areas or two particular sources that we had to migrate. One, the standard Sitecore media library and getting all those assets into Content Hub, and then also getting the assets from Dropbox, this client, this particular one that I'm talking about. They also had a lot of assets in Dropbox and getting all of them migrated into Content Hub. I'll close with a little bit of content governance and our final results, and that's it. So the first thing we need to think about is that this is not about the technology. This is really about the experience, the user experience or customer experience. In this particular case, it is the user experience, the internal user experience that matters most, because when you are dealing with multiple different assets, multiple different repositories, and everything all over the place, and you don't know where to find something, that's a terrible experience. So you want to solve that, and the way you solve that, it's really thinking about what makes sense for the people working with creating the content, adding the content, uploading assets and everything, to do their job, I guess, in an easier way. So what really matters here is providing the best experience for people working with digital assets. The technology, of course, will come to solve that. So we're not bringing Content Hub just for the sake of Content Hub because it's the newest thing that Sitecore has to offer there. But we bring that because this is actually coming to solve a customer experience problem. And this is what we do as Sitecore partners, as developers and architects. We find the right solution for our customers. We don't simply push technology, but first, we think strategically in terms of what they want to achieve and what is the best way to achieve that. So sometimes if you have a hammer, maybe that hammer, it's not necessarily the right tool for the task, and you need to think about what is the right tool for what they want to do. So yeah, that's the message basically here. The original situation this client had was that they had a lot of different sources where content, especially in this case, media assets, were being managed. So they were using the Sitecore Media Library, which is the default Sitecore repository. There's nothing wrong with that. You can have many sites working with the Sitecore Media Library quite well. If you're managing your caching and doing some sort of integration maybe with a content delivery network as well. So you can live with that. But the Sitecore Media Library, it's definitely not a digital assets management platform. It doesn't give you a lot of different things that Content Hub will provide you, such as the right approach in terms of workflows, the right approach in terms of creating different versions and dimensions for your image, etc. The flexibility of scaling for deployments, because it's everything managed by Sitecore, cloud-based in an appropriate sized servers. When you work with the Sitecore Media Library, you are working with your own environment, if you're going on-prem, of course, and you need to manage that. Dropbox, it was the other repository they had. Their creative team was using that pretty much just to share all the different assets they had with different folders. But that's pretty much it. It's just a bunch of folders where they put their files in there and they share. It doesn't have a lot of features. It's really very more static in that sense. It is, of course, a solution that can work for smaller companies. But when you get a client like this with like 10,000 different assets to manage, having different folders in Dropbox is not really the best situation there, with not the right search options, not the right tools in place to make this work properly. They also had on-prem servers out of Syracuse where they had a bunch of files and their different teams were working with that. And on top of that, they also had SharePoint. So as you guys can see, those are different places, different environments, different folders, different silos, if you will, where the teams would have a very hard time to find anything. So if you are looking for maybe just a banner or a video or a logo, you would need to start looking all over the place, and that was a nightmare to find something. Sometimes you would have like pieces being duplicated in different places, different repositories, and that was not ideal at all. So having a centralized repository with an appropriate governance on top, integration with Sitecore, the robustness of being leveraged from scaled servers in the cloud, this is where Content Hub comes into place and offers the solution for our clients in this particular situation. What we would do next in this particular scenario here is really discuss with the client from a strategic perspective what makes sense to get migrated, what doesn't make sense to get migrated, and where to start, what is the most important to be migrated. And this is what we had done with them. So we had a series of workshops where we discussed with their different teams and we figured out. So we started with the Sitecore Media Library, and then the next step was Dropbox, and then finally we went through the on-prem servers and SharePoint, etc. On this presentation, I'll focus on the first two, so the Media Library 1 and Dropbox. So how Content Hub can help in this kind of scenario? Sitecore Content Hub, it does allow for a single source of truth, of course. So it's becoming, as it becomes that repository where you know where to go to find what you need, all the assets are there, so you can leverage the governance model that you put in place in Content Hub to give access to the right people at the right collections of assets, and also the right permissions, whether they can approve or not something. So this is where Content Hub comes into place. And one of the issues that we had initially was, okay, how are we going to get all this into Content Hub? Content Hub actually comes with an asset uploader feature, and that's very handy because the way it works, you need just to provide the right set of metadata and the point of access for your media assets, and once you get that uploaded into Content Hub, it takes care of doing all the import of the assets. So this is very, very, very handy. And other than that, it comes with a Sitecore CMS connector, which means that if you are in Sitecore content editor or experience editor, you just can click a button and find the assets you want from Content Hub instead of the Sitecore Media Library. So that is very handy as well. And one of the things that Content Hub offers, and this goes beyond other anything that they had before for managing their assets, is the data modeling and governance feature. The data modeling one was very important for them because with Content Hub you are not frozen only into the fields or attributes, the metadata that are available out of the box for your media assets. You can actually expand on that. So you can create your own schema for the assets. And that schema can include different attributes that you can later use for having facets for searching assets. For example, you can create an attribute for whatever that asset is pertinent to a particular department or a particular gender, year, whatever different attributes you want to have in place. You can model into your asset schema, and that will facilitate the life of people working with those assets. Well, having the right balance between too much granularity in terms of fields for assets and too little, it is the kind of strategy that you need to keep in mind, because when you put too much granularity, when you have too many fields and you make, I guess, a lot of them like mandatory or required, that makes your content author's life harder. So you need to find the right balance between what makes sense to your client, to your customer, to have in place. So they really need to filter by department or by site or by something like that, or they don't need that. So you can just make it as optional or not have that field at all. And the other extreme would be not having any additional fields in place. So find that right balance between too much granularity and too little granularity in terms of the different metadata and attributes you want to have in your data modeling for your assets. It is a work that you need to do with your customers around some workshops until you get the point where they will validate that, you approve it, so you're good to go and get that defined in Content Hub, and then from there you start working on the migration of the different assets. So the actual migration work, as I said, so you start from that data modeling. For this particular customer, we had a few different things that we want to have in place that would make sense for them. Things like age, event, gender, year, role, whether it's a veteran or not, employer. So different attributes that they would later use for a facet search. For example, in the right side of this screenshot, you have some facets. For example, they have something called RTB, so employer RTB, consumer RTB, and then you could just check one of the checkboxes there, and only the assets that are tagged to that would show up. So that makes their life easier. But again, you need to make sure that those different facets will make sense to them, and they will actually be able to tag to them. Because if it's something that is overkill to content authors, this is really not going to help. So you start with the data modeling. You define the data model, and you define that in a way that's going to enable an intuitive facet search for your customer. They look at that, it makes sense to them, so you're in the right path. So you have that in place, and with that in place, you will start putting together your schema. So you go into Sitecore Content Hub, you're going to define all those different schemas, and you assign them to mainly the m.asset, specifically Content Hub, which is the main one for all those digital assets, but not necessarily. Content Hub is more than that. In this presentation, I'm going to talk about m.asset. M.asset is the model for media assets, but Content Hub can actually be used to create like blog posts, news release, any kind of different content you want. But in this particular migration scenario here, we're talking about digital assets. So how do we prepare to migrate assets, digital assets into Content Hub? As I said before, Content Hub comes with a tool that makes it simpler to migrate or upload content into Content Hub. All you need to do is to put in place an Excel file that has columns for each one of the different fields that you have defined in your model. So each field will match the model or your schema for the different field names. And there you are going to have the public link for your file. Where can you retrieve that file from? And all the other different fields that you want to migrate. Once you have this Excel file compiled, all you need to do is to upload this Excel file to Content Hub using the upload tool, the migration tool, and it is going to import, using the public links, all those media assets, and also populate the different attributes following the different columns you have in your file. So this is what we call the m.asset file, and that's pretty much what we need to do. So you go to import Excel, you upload your m.asset file, and while it is doing that, you want to keep an eye in your logs, of course, to check whether it's having any kind of issues, because maybe you got one of the columns doesn't really match the different field names in your schema, or maybe there's something wrong there, something that's not being recognized. So you monitor, keep a look in your logs, and if there's something wrong there, you are going to go back to your Excel file, fix it, and try again. Once that is done, all the public, you just need to have all the public links created and extracted. Yeah, Content Hub will take care of that for you. So what about the legacy links on the website? So just to step back a little bit, when I'm talking about getting that Excel file in place, we're talking about, especially for the Sitecore Media Library, generating a list of all the assets we have in the media library. The public links for all those assets will need to be there. So this is where PowerShell can come to our rescue. We can use PowerShell to generate all the public links for all the assets in them, and also to extract all of them and generate that Excel file for us. So you don't need to manually create that Excel file. Using PowerShell, any developer that knows Sitecore PowerShell quite well can easily generate that m.asset Excel file and populate all the columns with all the required public links for those assets and all the attributes that will be there by default from Sitecore. And whatever new attributes will be in place, the client can later come to that Excel and populate them as well, if required, before you do the migration. On top of that, you can also use PowerShell to later update all the internal links for the media assets in your Sitecore instance, because after you have migrated everything from Media Library to Content Hub, your Sitecore content page, they're still pointing to your Media Library items. So now what you need to do is to update rich text fields, image fields, any link fields pointing to your legacy Media Library. Now they need to be pointing to Content Hub. So once again, you can leverage PowerShell to do that, and once you run those scripts, it is going to find and also using your generated Excel file, it is going to find all the links pointing to Media Library and update them to make them point back to Content Hub. Dropbox is not much different than that. It's kind of the same approach. The only problem I faced with Dropbox in this particular scenario is that Dropbox doesn't really have an easy way to create public links in a bulk out of the box. So you can't really do that with Dropbox. So the way we approach it to do that, we used the Dropbox.net SDK. And using that SDK, we wrote a script to generate all required public links for all assets to be migrated. Once that was done, it was pretty much the same approach. You have the Excel file, you have the public link that was generated by this script using the SDK in place. And with that, it was pretty much just a question, again, of uploading that Excel file and letting Content Hub do the job. In terms of governance, Content Hub comes, with a feature that allows us to integrate with Active Directory. It requires some configuration, it requires some work to do there, but once that is in place and you follow all the documentation, you can have different user groups coming from Active Directory and defined as well. And your approval workflow can be based on your users being logged and using their Active Directory credentials. And that was also implemented for those clients. One of the different group of users that we had in place, for example, was around Sitecore uploaders. So people that can actually upload assets from Sitecore into Content Hub. So the governance in Content Hub, it's pretty straightforward. It's not much problematic in that sense, and getting it integrated with Active Directory make our life easier. So final results, we got more than 10,000 assets in Content Hub, and that was really a question of hours to get migrated. After it was migrated, it takes probably, well, for this amount of assets at least, it took about a night. It was overnight to get everything indexed. So it takes some time to get indexed. Getting them uploaded into Content Hub is faster than getting them all indexed and everything showing up nicely in the search results. So yeah, it was pretty much a question of a couple of days after all the scripts were in place. More than 10,000 assets were migrated, indexed, and showing up, and with asset search in place. Yeah, and that's pretty much it. Rodrigo, I would like you to comment a little bit as well, because I know you had some experience initially on that, especially around the public links and the PowerShell. If you could please comment on the PowerShell part of that, that's really appreciated.
Oh, thanks. First of all, thanks. That was amazing presentation, Eduardo. It goes nicely throughout the new Content Hub stuff and etc. And yes, I've been always a passionate developer of PowerShell, and the Sitecore PowerShell extensions does have something called reports. I don't have any slides to show, unfortunately, but basically you can use PowerShell scripts to export data into tabular format. So you can see on screen, but you can also download it out of the box. Gives you the ability to download what you see on screen as a CSV file. You know, a CSV file can be easily opened as an Excel and format and exported as an Excel if you want as well. So whatever we've done was not complicated, Eduardo. We just found one of the scripts because the PowerShell extensions comes with, I don't know, maybe more than 100 of reports that you can use to export data. And we took one that was closer to what we were looking for. We customized that one and allowing us to, you know, export data from the media library only, and with the columns that we wanted, with the column names and etc. It was a nice, I would say, clever way of exporting that metadata, and Sitecore gives you the public links automatically, right? Crazy how
As soon they are
Dropbox.
published, right? If they're not published, you're not getting that. Yes, but yes.
True. Yeah, and crazy how the Dropbox doesn't allow the same. So it was nice to see how you circumvented that. Yes. Any questions, guys? Anyone has any question? Let us know.
Yeah, if you guys have questions and you want to just send later your Twitter or just email or yeah, just reach out to us at Nishtech or to Rodrigo, and we'll be more than glad to answer you guys.
Chris is a great content hub enthusiastic, and he also is working with multiple content hub implementations. Most of them are not, even involving Sitecore XP, right? So you, Chris, should have to deal probably with a lot of situations like this where you have to export assets from different places and they don't have the right connectors and etc. Do you want to throw out some words on this?
Well, yeah, basically for Content Hub projects, the two biggest pieces of Content Hub projects, and that's why I'm really good in your presentation that you pointed that out, was that the data model, making sure that your data model is defined first. That's really what I've seen over the past couple of years. That's what I've seen has been kind of the tragic flaw of people trying to deploy and implement Content Hub, is that they don't do their data model first, and then later they try and adjust it because they're used to XP. Because in XP, you can very easily change the data type and say, oops, I actually meant it to be blah. In Content Hub, you have to create a new field under that type, and then you have to use script to move all the data. And when you're working with millions of assets, that can really delay a project. So I'm really glad that you pointed out early on. It was like, okay, let's figure out where we're getting the data from, and then immediately let's nail down the data model.
That's where we start. I agree with you, Chris. That's why I had that as the first step.
Yeah.
Hey, Eduardo, one thing I remember from this project is that from a certain period, the big lack of definition was, okay, it was easy to export the data using the Excel sheet exported by PowerShell, right? But then, how many metadata can we get? At some point, we were considering using the folder structure to...
Exactly, and that was missed as well, because the folder structure in Sitecore gave us a hint in terms of what year that particular asset was from, which department was from. And we leveraged that path to populate automatically some of the attributes, but there was still some manual work to be done by the client at the end.
Cool. Yeah. Fair enough. Thank you, Eduardo.
Thank you, folks.
You're
All
awesome.
yours, Brandon.
Very good presentation.
Thanks. Good presentation.